let's jump in. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 21, verse 1 through 7. We've done all this recapping at this point. So let's read together, and right off the bat, we're going to see a provision. Everybody say provision. Provision. Sweet. Okay, here we go. Genesis chapter 21, verse 1 through 7. Let's read together. The Lord came to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time God had told him. Abraham named his son who was born to him, the one Sarah bore to him, mind you, Isaac. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. She also said, who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So it's cool. We start this passage tonight at the tail end of where we were last week after their faithfulness in the waiting, 25 stinking years. And again, that's CJ, I think, is the only one in this room that's older than me. So like the rest of y'all, that was like, that's longer than you've been alive. That is a long time of waiting. So after 25 years of waiting and their faithfulness in the waiting, God finally provides what he promised. He's not in a hurry. So we could ask tonight, we could say, well, wait a minute, now why did God wait this long? Why didn't he just kind of fulfill his promise sooner? Was this like a test of obedience for Abraham? Was he trying to figure? We don't really know. So we're going to save that question and table it for a little later because we're going to see something else tonight. So we see this provision, and right at this provision, y'all ready for this? What do you think we got next? Right after this provision, we got another problem. Right? We got promises, problems, and provision. And there seem to be a lot of problems. So right off of this, we start with this. And man, it's great. God has fulfilled his promise to Abraham. But skip ahead one more chapter to Genesis chapter 22. Go ahead and turn there now. We're going to do a lot of reading there tonight. We got another problem. Here's the problem. Read with me. This is a big problem, by the way. So I want you guys to remember. I know we just said all this. But I want you to remember. God promised Abraham a son, right? There's a lot of problems, a lot of issues with it. How long did they wait? 25 years. And he's got a son now that God promised him. And God said, remember now, you remember? God said, this son I will make into a great nation. Y'all remember that? Everybody with me? Everybody cool? Here we go, Genesis chapter 22, verse 1 and 2. After these things, right after all this, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, here I am, he answered. Take your son, he said, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. Say what? I mean, man, like, what? They just waited 2.5 decades to have this son. And everything is great. Everything's fine. No more problems. No more waiting. They've been faithful. And then God has the audacity to say, go take this son and sacrifice him to me. And here again, he says, take this son. And he didn't even tell him where to go. He says, take him and go where I tell you to go. I'll show you later. So remember when he did that? Remember when God last week, when he told Abraham, he said, hey, I want you to pick up everything, and I want you to go. I'm not going to tell you where you're going yet, but I just want you to pick up, and I want you to go, and I'll show you later, right? And we were like, holy cow, that takes a lot of faith, because you're talking about, like, leaving everything behind and just, like, jumping on the road and going. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So here we go again. God says, take your son that you've been waiting on so stinking long and go offer him to me as a burnt offering. Oh, you guys are not with me, man. I mean, can you imagine? No? Nobody can, man. Well, I actually can't. So, yeah, it's okay if you can't imagine. But it's kind of interesting because you see right here in verse 2, I mean, you see the pain that has to go into that. Right there in verse 2, God, it's almost like he rubs it in a little bit. He says, take your son, your only son. Yeah, I know, Lord, thanks. Whom you love. Yeah, I know, Lord, thanks. And offer him as an offering. He didn't just say, take Isaac, take this guy, and he said, take your only son, the one that you love, take your only son, whom you love, and go sacrifice him. Okay, so here's the amazing response of Abraham. Let's pick up in verse 3. Abraham has this incredible response. And you might see it coming because we've seen Abraham do this exact thing before. Verse 3, so early in the morning, Abraham got up, saddled his donkey, and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you. Verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand, he took the fire and the sacrificial knife, and the 2 of them walked on together. So here he is, having waited all this time, you guys. God says, take the son now and sacrifice him. And what does Abraham do? He gets up in the next morning, and he prepares for a sacrifice. And he takes the son with him. I mean, what? I mean, like, seriously, what? You're telling me that you're willing to give up this son that you have waited and agonized so long to have, and now you're just going to so easily just take him and sacrifice him? I'm amazed by his response, you guys, because I would, wait a minute, Lord, now what'd you say? Yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, what did I hear you right? Is that really what you said? Is that really what you want? I would come up with some excuse, right? I would find some kind of loophole. I mean, I would do whatever I could. Yet Abraham just says, okay, God, you got it. And he takes his son, and they go up the mountain. Y'all, man, I think there's 2 things, man, that we see here that Abraham kind of demonstrates. But number one, obviously, we see that he's got this intense faith, this extreme faith, this radical faith Abraham has in God. I mean, you have to have radical faith to do that. But he's got this radical faith. He takes his only son. You guys, man, Abraham, he was this faith acted in obedience. And you got to know that he does this because he absolutely knows, there's no way Abraham could have done this unless he knew that it's not about the servant, it's all about the what? There's no way that Abraham would have done that unless he knew in his heart, in his head, that it's not about the servant, it's all about the... So he's got this radical faith, and he takes Isaac. But the cool thing about faith is he also follows in obedience. He puts action to his faith. I want to tell you guys something tonight. You ready? This is what I want to tell you. True faith always takes real action. Everybody say true faith. Always. Wait, how often? You sure it's not like 95% of the time? You sure it's always? Yeah. Bro, prove it. True faith always takes real action. I think we got some notes up there, somewhere up there, CJ. You can put those up. But true faith always takes real action. Oh yeah, we're a little ahead of that now. Yeah, thanks, man. And I want to say this to you guys tonight. If there's no action to your faith, you may want to re-examine your faith. Let's look at James chapter 2, verse 18 through 21, as we kind of continue tonight. I'm just going to read it off the screen, if that's cool. James is writing, and he says this is what he says. He says, but someone will say, so he's talking about this kind of similar thing, and he says, but I know there's someone out there who's going to make this argument, and they're going to say, but James, and this is what he says. He says, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you my faith by my works. That's what he says. You believe that God is one, that there is one God. You do well. But guess what? The demons also believe that there is one God, and they shudder. Foolish man, are you willing to learn that faith without works is useless? Wasn't Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac, his son, on the altar? So there we got the same exact thing. He's talking about this very thing, and this is what he's saying here. James is saying in this passage that, listen, if you claim to have faith, you have to put action to it. If you claim to have faith and there is no fruit from your hands, you're not planting seeds, you're not reaping a harvest in your life, there's no fruit from your works, from your faith, and your faith is probably dead. If you claim to have faith, but there's no action, there's no works that follow with it, then the faith that you may have may not be faith at all. If you listen to say, I am. So let's jump back to the passage. Genesis chapter 22. We're in verse 7. So it says, Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham and said, My father. And he replied. And y'all, this is heartbreaking to me. I don't have a son yet. But I'm thinking about being in this situation. I don't have a son, but I'm thinking about my son. And I'm thinking about if I've got a knife in my hand and I've got a pile of wood and I'm about to lay my son on this altar. At this point, Isaac looks up to his dad and he says, Hey, Dad. Abraham says, Yes, son. Isaac says, The fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? I don't know if you guys can imagine that tonight. Having your son, your child, who you have waited so long for, and you're holding his hand, walking up this mountain, and he says, Dad, where's the offering? Son, you are. But that's not what he says here. Look at this. Look in verse 8. I love this. Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And then the two of them walked on together. You see, you guys, Abraham, in spite of having to wait so long for 25 years, in spite of now having yet another problem of God testing his faith and testing his obedience, in spite of all that, and y'all, so our theology and our belief in God gets challenged when life gets tough for us, man. I mean, let's just be honest. Our theology is in a state of flux as human beings. Like, we understand, and we're like, yeah, okay, God, I know you're loving, I know you're patient, you're gentle, you love me, you care about me. But then when life gets tough, a lot of times, man, we throw in the towel, and you say, well, God, I thought you loved me. I thought you cared about me. I've been waiting for a job for a year. I've been waiting on this for 5 years. I've been waiting. I thought you cared, man. You're not even involved, you know? You know what I mean? Like, we have this theology, but it's constantly changing with our circumstances, and we lose faith so easily. But here's Abraham in the midst of all these situations, all this waiting, and now in the midst of this incredible emotional torment of thinking about sacrificing his son, and he is still clinging to the faithfulness of God. He says in verse 5, he tells his servants, he says, stay here with the donkey. He says, the boy and I will go over there to worship, and then we will come back to you. We will come back to you. In verse 8, Isaac says, where's the offering? Abraham says, God will provide. God will provide. So the cool thing about it is that I think that Abraham had such belief that God was faithful to his promise, that he knew that even though God had just told him to go and take his son Isaac, that God, in his all sovereignty, in his omniscience, in his wisdom, was still going to be faithful to the promise that he had made to Abraham, that he was going to make that son Isaac into a great nation and bless all the earth through him. He didn't understand that, I don't think. I don't think Abraham understood that. But I think Abraham knew that God commanded him to go take his son, and he also knew that God is faithful, God is good, and God is just to his word. And so he said, I don't understand these two things right now. They seem to conflict, but I'm going to do what you tell me because I trust you and I have faith in you. And that's what he does. And then here's what's happened. Let's continue reading together. We're going to read 19 through 18. That'll be the end of this passage tonight. So they keep walking, the two of them, Abraham and Isaac. And it says, when they arrived at the place that God had told him about, Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood. And then he bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. I can't imagine torment in that man Abraham's heart. As verse 10, he reached out and he took the knife and raised it to take the breath out of his son's body. I can't imagine the torment in his heart. Lord, what are you doing? Why? What's going on here? He takes that knife to slay his son. And just in time, verse 11, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham! And he replied, Here I am. Then he said, Don't lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in the thicket. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named that place, The Lord Will Provide, which is Yahweh Yireh, I believe. The Lord will provide. So today it is said, it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your only son, I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. So here's the what again? Promise. Here's the promise again. Your offspring will possess the gates of your enemies, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring because you have obeyed my command. It's amazing to me that Abraham had such a faith, such an active faith, that he was willing to go all the way in obedience, even if the Lord didn't intervene. Okay, Lord, I'm trusting you. I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on, but I trust you. I know that you can even bring my son back to life if you desire, if you want to. So I'm trusting you, but I'm going all the way. I'm going to do what you said, even if you don't stop me and intervene. And he was prepared to do just that. I mean, this was so confusing. You guys, you got to understand, it takes incredible faith to be able to do this. If you're with me, say I am. And what's amazing here is this. God provides the ram. I want to tell you something tonight. Are you ready for this? I'll give you a little nod. If you're ready for this, give me the rock star thing. There we go. Okay. I think most of you are ready. I want to tell you this. Right here in this passage, when Abraham was so faithful, so trusting, so obedient, that he was going all the way in obedience, right before he acts, God provides this ram. And I want to tell you tonight, God always provides for his will to be done. Because you got to think about it. What's more important than God? Nothing, right? I mean, if there was anything more important than God would not be the one worthy of worship, right? We're not more important than God. We're not seated on the throne of heaven, on the kingdom of heaven. God is. And so many times we feel like our desires are the ones that matter the most. We feel like God exists to suit our needs rather than we exist for his purpose and for his glory, to suit his needs, to worship him. You know what I'm saying? God is worthy of worship. There is no one greater than God, and God is all powerful. So this means that God is always going to provide for his will to be done. So here's the cool thing. If you are a Christian and if you are living in his will, if your number one desire is to worship him and to bring him glory and live in his will, you never have a thing to worry about, because you'll always have what you need to accomplish his will for his glory. That's amazing to me. That at nights when I can't sleep, when we can't pay bills, we don't know if we're going to eat, whatever happens in life, whatever is going on, in those times I can rest assured that I'm where the Lord wants me to be, because I want to worship him and glorify him, and I belong to him. So if I'm obedient where I'm at, then I am in his will, and he is getting the glory for it in some kind of way or will further down the road. Isn't that a good word? So verse 15 through 18, God gives this promise again. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless all the earth through you. And y'all, this is cool because this is a foreshadow. Y'all remember learning that word in English? The dreaded English class. Yeah. Foreshadow. This is amazing here what happens. You want to know why? Now remember, God said to Abraham, I want you to take who? Your only son, whom you love. God said, I want you to take your only son, whom you love, and I want you to lay him on the altar and sacrifice him in love for me, in obedience to me. Abraham took his son, he put him on the altar, and he went to kill him. And just in the nick of time, God provided. He provided the lamb. And you guys, listen to me. If you zoned out, listen to me. Thousands of years later, perfect time, God would provide the lamb. And that lamb would be slain for you and I's sins. God always provides. Even when we don't see it, when we don't feel like it, when we're confused, God always provides. And now we've got the perfect lamb, capital L, the perfect lamb. And I remind you again, God is not in a hurry. He grows things. So here we have as Abraham was laying it all on the altar, and God said, wait, I provide the lamb. Thousands of years later, God would work through this promise that he gave to Abraham, which was, I'm going to make you into a great nation, which we're going to see next week what that is and what that entails and the fun, exciting journey that goes into all of that. And he said, I'm going to bless all nations through you. What was the blessing of all nations? The blessing of all nations, you guys, thousands of years later, was the provision of the lamb. Y'all feeling me tonight? God's not in a hurry. He grows things, and at the perfect time, he provides. Oh, that's a good word, Johnny. Ah! Man, that's awesome. So we got to ask tonight, man, how could Abraham be willing to sacrifice his son? His son, his one son, the son whom he loved. As we're closing up tonight, these are the last couple things. So if you zoned out, come back in. We are wrapping up. How could Abraham be willing to sacrifice his son? There's a few reasons. There's a few ways. Number one, God took the absolute top place in Abraham's life. God took priority in Abraham's life. You see, here's what happens. If God is number one on the throne of your heart, then when God says, you know what, hey, I want you to take number 2, I want you to take number 3, I want you to take number 4, number 5, I want you to get rid of those because I want you to be that much closer to me, that much more intimate with me. What happens is we go, okay, God, that doesn't make sense to me maybe. God, that's going to hurt, but you are number 1 and there's nothing more important than you, so whatever you say goes. I want to please you. I want to walk with you. I want to have fellowship with you, and so you got it. Anytime there is something over God in our lives, which I'm willing to bet tonight that all of us have at least a few things that are more important to us than God is. I'm willing to bet that most of us in here tonight, all of us in here tonight, have a few things in our life that are more important than God is. Anytime you have something that's over God, that is an idol. We talked about this a little bit Sunday morning if you were here. And we have a habit of idolizing the creation over the Creator. We kind of talked about that a couple weeks ago. But Abraham had the choice here to make Isaac become his idol. To make Isaac, what God had promised him, creation, become his idol. And he could have chosen to cherish and value Isaac over the one who promised him and created him. Does that make sense? Many times we take what God has given and we shift our attention to it, and we hold to it, taking it off of God. God gives us a blessing, and we put our attention on the blessing, and it takes all of our time, all of our energy, all of our effort. Abraham was willing and able to do this because God took the top place in his life. Second, I think we've got these on the thing as well. Yeah, they're right there if you guys want to look. Second, Abraham understood that it's not about the what? It's all about the what? It's not about the, it's all about the. Abraham understood that. We talked about that a little while ago. There's no way that he could have chosen to take his son and be obedient to God unless it was all about God's will and not his will. Y'all see what I'm saying? If Abraham was his own master, if Abraham was the master of his life, then he would have said, you know what, God, I hear what you're saying, but bump that. I'm going to go do what I want to do. I'm going to serve myself. I'm going to serve my flesh. I'm going to serve my own desires. But he said, I'm your servant. You're the master. Whatever you say goes. I'm going to do it. He could have chosen to take his son and run from God, but he would have forfeited the promises that God had given him. And I want to say this tonight. Don't let your problems, there's the word again, don't let your problems cause you to run and forsake God's provision. Don't let your problems cause you to run and forsake God's provision. God is always up to something, especially when we don't see or feel it. Trust him. 3, Abraham trusted God even when it defied logic. You remember that at the very beginning? Abraham was like, huh? Say what? You want me to do what now? But instead he chose, even when it didn't make any sense, any rational, logical sense, he chose to obey God. And I want to tell you this tonight. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the next couple weeks. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't lean on your own understanding. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Lean not on your understanding, but with all your heart, trust in the Lord. He'll make your path straight. Sometimes things won't make sense. Don't lean on your understanding. Sometimes your feelings will make it feel like God is far, like he is not hearing you, like he's not even involved in your life. Don't lean on your understanding. And last, Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son to God for the same reason that God was willing to sacrifice his son for us. Out of pure love. Are you listening tonight? Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son for the same reason that God was willing to sacrifice his son. Love. I want to ask you tonight, do you love God? You're in here tonight, and we're kind of all tired. It's the end of the school year and stuff, and we're missing a lot of people, so it's a different atmosphere. But I want to ask you tonight, in this moment, do you love God? Every day, do you love God? Is this just a faith, like you know God and you do, or is this an active faith where your real faith takes real action, and every day, man, it's evident that you love the Lord? You probably heard this said, this little phrase, this statement. But if you were on trial for being a Christian, you probably heard this, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Do you love God? Are you as devoted to him as you should be, maybe? And let me ask you this. We're going to close, and I think we're actually going to sing a little bit tonight. We've got a little time left over. Abraham took his son, and he put him on that altar. Y'all listen to me. If you listen to say I am. So we're almost done, so give me your attention just for another minute or two. The altar is a place where something goes to die. It's where something goes to die. Abraham took his son to lay on the altar as an act of love and devotion to God. So I want to ask you tonight, what do you need to lay on the altar? What is in your life that's taking your time, your affection, your energy? Y'all, listen, what is keeping you from having a passionate life full of joy and peace and excitement about God and telling everyone that you know that's lost about him? What's keeping you? Because God's not keeping you from that. God's not withholding something from you that he wants you to have. That's silly. That's nonsense. God wants you to go. He wants you to tell people. He wants you to have that joy and that excitement. He wants you to love him. He wants you to know him and walk with him. It's not on God. Listen, it's on us. And so what do we need to lay on that altar tonight? For some of us, we may need to lay ourselves on that altar. It's a place to die. We may need to die to ourselves so that we can be alive in Jesus and feel his presence again. Let me ask you this. Most of us, a lot of us in this room, we went to that retreat in February, and it was awesome, right? I mean, we all had a great time. Felt close to the Lord, man. We're singing and just had an awesome time growing together. How often have you picked up your Bible since then? That's good. Do you have a good prayer life? Have you found that, you were doing this over here and it was exciting and it was great, and have you kind of started trekking back down the hill? Listen, what's holding you back? What do you need to lay on the altar tonight? Is it comfort? Is it time you spend just laying around and playing games or reading books, or whatever? And all that stuff's great. That stuff's fine, but what do you need to put down that you can pick up the word? Does that make sense? So I want you guys just close your eyes tonight as we end, and I want you to think about that. What is in your life? What idol is in your life maybe that God is calling you to put on the altar? Do you have the faith and the obedience to lay that down tonight? So just close your eyes and think about that. Think about what's in your life that you need to